Signal seekers, this is your wake-up call. You've been hearing it in the noise, seeing it in the static. Are you receiving the frequency? Strange lights, lost places, forgotten stories. The signal has always been there. If you can hear this transmission, you're already part of the signal. Welcome to Backwoods Signal, broadcasting from the edge of reality.
Before there was static attached to this, before I started plotting sightings, before I started looking at disappearances, strange encounters, geology, military installations, or anything else, I drew a map. Well, sort of. I colored in some spaces on a map and drew a line. This was the start of something that I really wasn't expecting. This was the start of understanding that maybe there was something going on here that I really can't explain. And that's what we're going to dive into starting tonight. 5 zones. 5 zones, not on this map. This early map only had 4. Now we have 5. Well, let me get to that. Here's the current map. With 5 zones, not because somebody told me these places were connected, not because a computer generated them, and definitely not because I already knew what the data was going to say. I drew them because after years of looking at strange stories across the country, certain places just seem to keep showing up again and again and again. At first, the zones were basically filing cabinets of weirdness, nothing more. But then I had a question. What happens if I actually put the data on top of them? Would the map survive, or would the evidence destroy it? So that's exactly what I tried to do. I asked the data to destroy my map, and instead, it gave me a much stranger problem. Welcome to Backwoods Signal. Tonight, we're entering Zone 1s, but before we get to that, I want to give you guys a little bit of what really started this. This is Backwoods Signal. Real encounters, real places, real stories. And around here, we don't have to believe every story we hear. We investigate it because sometimes the stories fall apart. Sometimes they're perfectly normal explanations. And sometimes you start putting the dots on a map and realize there's a whole lot more dots than you expected. So here's what we started out with. We started out with 5 zones. And I had reports and reports and reports. And those reports generated from someplace. This is currently roughly the UFO activity layer. And you notice now in the center here, there is an area that is not zoned. We're not going to focus on that yet because that could be a completely different thing going on altogether. What we are going to talk about are the colored areas. Zone 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Tonight, we're only going to dive into Zone 1. But we're going to first discuss the layout, the thing that led me to start wondering what's really going on here. And could this be something? So here we have the UFO activity layer. The high concentration in zone 1, zone 2, not so much. I mean, there's sprinkles in the the obvious areas of Arizona and Colorado, or excuse me, Utah and Colorado. But when we get to Arizona, New Mexico, not as much as we thought we would find. California, a little bit more in certain areas. But zone 3 actually ends just south of Mount Shasta. So we're not even considering central and southern at all in California. Zone 4, there's some. Actually, the box covers quite a bit of the activity in Zone 4. I apologize for that. When I was generating this last night, it was getting late. And this image was generated last night, the actual overlay. So there is that. Zone 5, which is really just a new addition and not a determined zone yet. I haven't concreted that zone and said this is definitely zone 5. This is the potential zone 5 that we're looking at here from Pennsylvania up through the New England area, the yellow zone there. But zone 1 is rich all over, as you can tell. And there's some pretty strong evidence there with zone 1 and zone 5. So I'm very curious about both of those. Definitely curious about both of those. Now here's the missing person layer. This layer really made me start to raise my eyebrows a little bit. As you can tell, the heart of the country, Texas, up into the Dakotas, and all of this area not zoned yet, strangely enough, is not as lit up here as it was in the UFO activity. But when we get to zone 1, like some of the areas of zone 5, again, pretty strong. Again, the box on zone 4 is kind of covering it up, but there's quite a bit of activity in zone 4 there. Zone 2, it's a lot more active with missing persons than it was with UFO activity. There's a UFO activity again. So here's the missing person again. So we've got we've actually got quite a bit of activity north of zone 2 also. I may eventually add be adding to zone 2. I'm sorry, I just kind of I forgot about all the activity to the north there in Iowa. Iowa may wind up getting added to that after a while. Let me see something right quick. I'm going to switch this one more time. The UFO activity in Iowa is very sparse, but also you've got to remember the population in Iowa is a lot different. So then we had geology and mineral layers. Now, here it gets kind of interesting because zone 4 very heavy in the geology and mineral layer map. Um, Zone 1, again. Zone 5, very heavy. Zone 2, not looking too shabby there. Again, when you get to the heart of like Texas, up into the Dakotas and Minnesota and so forth, not so much. You notice there's kind of a void there for a lot of stuff. So oddly, um, some of the stuff that showed up as heavy and intense in the areas that I zoned really surprised me. I was like, okay, so maybe there is something to this. Maybe I'm onto something. And this is where I really started getting interested in advancing the idea of the zones. And I was like, okay, so now I want to run tests. I want to run some hardcore um, debunking stuff to see if I can debunk these theories and see if maybe I'm wrong about the zones. Maybe there's something about the zones that I just need to break it down into easier to digest chunks of activity and leave it at that. And maybe there's nothing going on in these zones that is different or special that would lead me to something. And let me say something here about this. Like, you got to understand, this is a fluid and active part of my research. And when I say that, what I'm saying is, like, at any time, the evidence may compel me to change my mind about certain zones, about how certain areas are split up, whether zones should expand, decrease, or increase. I mean, there's a lot of things going on here. This is an active, very active investigation or research. So this is not set in concrete. It is fluid. It's very fluid, is what I'm trying to say. So even though what I'm finding now to be true, the research, the data may prove later on to not be so much so. So there may be times when I have to come back and update this, is what I'm saying, because I'm not going to sit here and say this is definitive research and this is how it's going to be and this is the exact data as it is. That's not really even logical. That's not, I mean, when it comes to the data is fluid. There are things that change all the time. Various influences can change data. For instance, I haven't even gone into, does weather and climate affect any of this? If so, what are the future effects because the climate is changing? There's a lot of questions I still have, a lot of things I haven't put to the test that could drastically change the current hypothesis or theory. So when I'm saying this, when I'm talking about this, please do not get me wrong in believing that I'm saying that this is set in concrete and this is the way it is, because that is completely not what I'm saying. And what we're going to be going over next will kind of set the pace for how I'm going to work with this. And we're going to talk a little bit now about the zones, about the 5 areas here. So I divide the country into 5 areas based on recurring clusters of strange reports and geography surrounding them. Zone 1, which is the zone we're going to be covering tonight, is Kentucky, Tennessee, North Alabama, North Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, West Virginia, and Ohio. Zone 2 takes us west to Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, Nevada, and Colorado. Zone 3 moves us into Washington, Oregon, and North California, and that could expand. Zone 3 could expand to include Iowa at some point. We'll see. And it could even go farther down into California. Again, like I said, this is very fluid stuff. It's not concrete. Zone 4 covers Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, and Indiana currently. And Zone 5, which is a provisional zone right now, covers Pennsylvania and New England. Everything outside of those areas isn't being declared normal. This isn't what this map means. Although I will tell you that as we look at this more and more, you will see that there's more activity in the zoned areas than the areas I have not currently zoned. And by the way, like I said, this is all of this so far is by past investigations, like my information over periods of time, intuition. A lot of things went into the zoning that I've done so far. The zones are simply the areas I've investigated, that we're investigating, you and I. Think of them as five giant case files. Okay, so zone 1 being a giant case file, 2, 3, 4, and 5, all different giant case files. That's how we're going to kind of look at this. We're opening the first one tonight. Okay. So let's talk for a minute about Zone 1, the Appalachian Heartland. Heartland, okay, that's Appalachian Heartland is Tennessee, Kentucky, North and South, or North Georgia, North Alabama, North Carolina, South Carolina, West Virginia, and Ohio. And possibly I may be including Virginia in this at some point. I have not ruled that out yet. Again, this is all very fluid. So those are the regions. These are the states within these regions. Now let's look at the Zone 1 map, which is this. Okay. Like I said, eventually the Virginia area may be in there, and even part of Pennsylvania may be included in Zone 1 at some point. Pennsylvania may be divided up between Zone 1 and Zone 5 at some point. It really depends. Again, very fluid. This is very fluid. The Appalachian Mountains cut through the heart of this, okay? So you have some of the oldest exposed mountain terrain on the continent in this area. And you can see that very plainly on the map going from North Georgia into North Carolina, the Virginias. West Virginia is the only state that is completely Appalachian. It is completely Appalachian Mountain in West Virginia, for those of you who do not know the area that much. North Alabama is where the foothills of the Appalachians are, and Tennessee has both the foothills as you go west. We got the Cumberland Plains, the Cumberland Plateau area, and we have the Great Smoky Mountains going into Tennessee. So we have quite a bit going on there in that. Kentucky, again, the foothills, lots of foothills. Ohio, foothill area to the Appalachians. So there's a lot there, a lot when it comes to the mountains itself. So here's some of the things that are part of the geography. Okay, we have a huge cave systems in this area, dense forest, remote valleys, major rivers, old mining counties. Um, there is native history stretching back thousands of years throughout this whole area. European settlements carrying centuries of folklore came into this area and scattered through all of it. So there's stories, uh, traditions, folklore, all surrounding uh, mostly the Scottish and Irish folks. There was a lot of Scottish and Irish that settled through the Appalachian area. Um, so, what are some of the things that we've got going on that lead us into our interest? Okay, we've got, first of all, obviously, like I was saying, lots of stories, strange lights, creatures, hauntings, people disappearing, unexplained sounds, and missing time. Uh, Things seen in the woods that eyewitnesses swear weren't bears, objects in the sky that witnesses swear weren't airplanes, and places where people simply tell you something feels different here. Okay. You see that a lot throughout the Smoky Mountain National Park area. I've experienced that quite a few areas there over the years, and I've been to the park several times throughout my lifetime, from a child all the way up into adulthood. Um, but still, that really doesn't prove anything paranormal, but it does give us somewhere to start looking, okay? And that's what we're going to do with some of this tonight. We're going to start trying to break down and really test, does this prove? What does it prove? If it does prove anything at all, let's talk about it. So let's look at zone one by the cases, okay? And we have several of them here, some of them very big cases from history. Um, when you look at zone one as one giant paranormal blob, individual cases begin to jump out at you, okay? Um, Hopkinsville, Kentucky. The Sutton family and their guests reported small humanoid creatures approaching a farmhouse near Kelly, Kentucky. Okay, so we all know about the Hopkinsville night siege. That was the story that actually, because of a misquote from a journalist, a newspaper journalist, the term little green men came from, because the Sutton family had called the creatures gray, and somewhere along the line, gray and green got mixed up. So it went from little gray men to little green men in the newspaper. And all the way through the paranormal history now, we've talked about little green men, and that's where it came from, the misquote from the Hopkinsville night siege. Now, whatever happened that night became one of the most famous alleged close encounters in American history. And importantly, we're not starting by saying aliens. We're starting with what witnesses said happened. Something frightened those people badly enough that the incident became part of UFO history. Now let's look at West Virginia, Flatwoods. The Flatwoods monster. Witness reported seeing a bright object across the sky. After investigating, members of the group described encountering a strange figure near the location. Again, explanations have been proposed: meteor, aircraft warning lights, an owl, misidentification, Maybe one of those explanations is right. We don't know that. But Flatwoods became another strange dot inside what would eventually become Zone 1. Now, Point Pleasant, again, West Virginia. West Virginia has a lot of high strangeness, guys. We've talked about that some in the show in the past. It will continue to be talked about throughout the history of the show, I'm quite sure. So we got Point Pleasant, 1966 through 1967. Witnesses began reporting a large winged figure with glowing red eyes. The name that sticks is Mothman. Whether you believe Mothman was an unknown animal, an owl destroyed by fear, folklore growing around unusual sightings, or something generally unexplained, the story becomes inseparable from the region. Then we got Oak Ridge. Okay, so we've gone from Kentucky to West Virginia, now back to Tennessee. This one changes the flavor of the investigation. Oak Ridge isn't folklore. It's one of the most historically significant nuclear research locations in the United States. And, by the way, the UFO releases, the first batch of releases of UFOs, there was documents in that release that specifically talked about Oak Ridge and concerns about unidentified aircraft flying around the Oak Ridge facility there. And when we study the reports of unusual aerial phenomenon, military activity, and sensitive government facility matters, this is what we're talking about, okay? Not because they automatically mean extraterrestrial, quite the opposite. Secret aircraft surveillance, military exercises, and classified technology create unusual sightings. Remember that. So Oak Ridge gives us something valuable, a possible conventional explanation for at least some of the strange activity. Now, I'm not going to rule out that there is possibly UAP, UFO activity around Oak Ridge. There is one case that has been reported years ago, even though I haven't found anything to qualify it yet, of a fisherman being abducted over around Clinch River area, just outside the Oak Ridge facility reservation. So I'm not going to say that all the activity through there is a conventional explanation, but I'm not going to rule it as being UFO, UAP in this episode either. But it also gives us another pattern to watch. Do unusual report clusters around sensitive locations? That's a question we can actually investigate. Okay. So let's go to Brown Mountain. Brown Mountain is another area which is in North Carolina, that is on the radar. Reports of mysterious lights go back generations around the Brown Mountain area, where they call them the Brown Mountain Lights. So this is a significant story. It has documentation. I've seen videos of the Brown Mountain Lights, and they're pretty strange, okay? People describe lights appearing above and around the mountains, moving slightly, strangely, slightly strange, sometimes vanishing even. There are conventional possibilities: atmospheric effects, vehicle lights, train lights, refraction, misidentification. So if the reports have persisted long enough that Brown Mountain has become part of the Appalachian mystery culture. Now, step back. Hopkinsville, Flatwoods, Mothman, Oak Ridge, Brown Mountain. Different phenomena, different decades, different witnesses, which is important. Because Zone 1, didn't give me the simple pattern I expected, okay? It suggested something else. And I'm not going to go into what it suggested specifically to me, but I was expecting something. I was expecting a pattern here. I didn't get it. When we expand beyond the famous cases, the map gets crowded quickly. Let's go back to that. Mammoth Cave, Point Pleasant, Brown Mountain, Blue Ridge, North Georgia, North Alabama, the Ohio Valley, places associated with caves, mountains, old settlements, battlefields, native sites, and remote wilderness. Okay. So we've got a lot going on there, generations of folklore. But here's where we have to be careful. A place having a lot of legends does not mean that there's a portal underneath it. Okay. Legends are legends. And even though people will say there's got to be some truth to the legends, I mean, a lot of legends are born out of some type of truth, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's what we think it is. Okay. A place having disappearances doesn't mean a cryptid took somebody. Case in point, Trini Gibson is in a book written by somebody who I'm not going to talk about in this video, who said that Bigfoot took her. We know now Trini Gibson was actually unalived on the mountain by a schoolmate. So not every disappearance, not every piece of folklore means that Bigfoot did it. A UFO report near a mountain doesn't mean the mountain caused the UFO. Correlation is not causation, okay? But correlation can tell you where to look next. So that's what we're going to do, layer by layer. So let me look at something right quick. We got my mug on there again. So all of this, remember all of this, and I'm going to come back to this at some point, possibly. We're going to, the paranormal activity. This map, I want you to I'm showing you this a little early because I want you to look at this because we talked about the legends. Okay. Now, some of these are factual reports. Some of it is based on legends. Some of it is based on, individual eyewitness accounts. So this is what I'm talking about when I talk about what we were doing here. And I know I'm kind of jumping around tonight. And this is the first night of the series. So bear with me on how I'm doing this because this is kind of exciting to me. And it's also something that there's just a lot of information to ingest here. Okay. Now, I don't have the overlay for this, but I'm going to talk about this because this is important. And I may drop a short segment as a short later with the overlay of the missing persons and go over this with the overlay on the map. So here's where things get dark though. Missing people. The Appalachian region contains enormous stretches of wilderness. People absolutely can and do disappear for ordinary tragic reasons. exposure, falls, drowning, injury, getting lost, crime, suicide, wildfire, wildlife, and weather. And terrain that can turn a simple mistake into a life or death situation incredibly quickly. The Appalachian Trail is full of treacherous areas, a lot of the mountain areas very treacherous. So when we talk about disappearances, um, all those explanations should come first. We need to rule out the mundane first. But for this investigation, we're looking into some of the more specific disappearances look that we have, okay? Not one case, not one spooky story. It's a geographic pattern, and we start comparing layers, and some areas keep appearing. And now we add the ground itself, okay? So I'll go back on another episode or a short, one of the two, and I'll add the overlay that I don't have right now for the missing person, and we'll go over that. That may be as my Monday drop. I'll let you guys know on Facebook whether or not, if you're in the Facebook group or you're part of the Facebook community that follows me on Facebook, you'll find out there about whether that's going to be part of the Monday drop or not, okay? So let's look at the geology and the geography of the area. Here, we're going to go over that for a bit. So here's zone 1, and we talked about it looking at the full map. This is where the investigation takes a turn, because underneath zone 1 is complicated geology, okay? We got mountain systems, faults, caves, underground water, mineral deposits, ancient rock formations, and enormous subterranean systems, okay? Mammoth Cave alone should remind us how much can exist beneath our feet without being visible from the surface. Could geology explain some of the strange reports? Absolutely. Natural magnetic fields, seismic activity, underground water, acoustics, infrasound. Remember that, infrasound. And atmospheric conditions all are legitimate things to investigate. And that leads to one mineral that comes up constantly when people talk about the paranormal locations, and that would be quartz. Quartz and minerals. Quartz is real. Its electrical properties are real. Okay, it has those lovely flashing effects that are real. Apply mechanical stress to a certain crystal, including quartz, and electrical charges can be generated. That's science. But here's where we draw a very bright line. Claims that quartz causes portals, hauntings, UFOs, or cryptid encounters are not established science. Okay, I know you've heard me talk about the importance of quartz before, and on a metaphysical basis, there's reasoning for that, but it is not an established science, okay? And I have to explain that, that's the hypothesis. That's what we're testing here, okay? Because zone 1 contains substantial mineral-rich geology. And if witnesses repeatedly report unusual phenomena, in particular geographical area environments or geological environments, I want to know whether that's meaningful. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But we don't throw away a possible variable because it sounds strange. We test it. Okay, so with that said, I kind of want to dabble into this for just a minute. Remember, I was telling you about, I've talked about the Thomas House in Red Boiling Springs. It has water going right underneath the house. It literally goes through. There's an underground spring, sulfur and some other stuff that goes through that spring, that goes right through the property that house is on. So there's that. There's like chert there, which chert has microscopic crystals, quartz crystal in it. There's just a lot of things about that whole thing. And here's something interesting about the Thomas House area. Okay, the Thomas House itself, the original Thomas House, the original hotel burned down to the ground. So what we see now is a rebuild, and that rebuild has had two separate fires. Okay, part of that building burned a long time ago and was never rebuilt. So it's a smaller building than it actually was originally. Okay. Along with that, a hotel across the street burned down completely just last year. I believe it was last year, maybe it was this year. Don't quote me on that. And a church that was across the street also burned down. So within the same block, 3 buildings burned down to the ground. One of them burned twice after it was rebuilt. So a lot of strange fires in that block. I just kind of wanted to throw that there. So while we're talking about all of this, let me get to, I'm going to see if I can find this without getting too. Okay, here's the quartz and mineral connection here. So you see the various quartz minerals and so forth through all of the area. You'll see there's a list here of different quartz minerals and so forth. I'll post these photos online on my socials coming up here and in the Facebook group. So if you have Facebook, go looking for the Backwoods Signal group, and these pictures will all be listed in there and will be on other social network platforms over the next few days after Saturday, after tonight, when this first airs. So after Saturday the 8th, these photos will be available to look at online on various platforms, but definitely the Facebook group is the best place to find it. Okay, so that's the mineral deposits, and here is the one that I'm going to next, which is probably the most controversial layer on this map. Okay, ley lines. The modern ideal proposes that significant ancient spiritual or unusual locations along invisible geographic pathways exist. There is no accepted scientific evidence that mystical ley line energy exists. Okay, again, this is not scientific evidence. This is strictly metaphysical belief. So why is it included? Because people have been making claims about sacred geography and unusual places for a very long time. Very, very long time, okay? And rather than pretending those claims are fact, we can put them to the map and see what happens. And that's what we're doing. Do alleged sacred sites align? Do caves? Do waterways? Mountain peaks? Historical settlements, UFO reports, disappearances? Maybe the apparent lines are simply what happens when human beings are getting enough points and start connecting them. And I love one of the comments I heard recently from a podcaster who was like, white people just like to make things weird. The New Age and the metaphysical community has kind of drummed up the ley line thing. And I'm not going to say that I disagree with it, but I'm not really sold on the ley line theory, okay? Is it a real possibility? Our brains are pattern finding machines. So the ley lines offer patterns. Our brains pick up the patterns and go, maybe there's something to this. But there's only one way to see whether patterns aside, there's only one way to decide whether a pattern survives scrutiny. Try to break it. So the ley lines is definitely one of the things that I look at, even though I'm not completely sold on it. To me, it's kind of one of those catch-all hokey things. I don't know. I could be completely wrong. Again, I'm not expert, okay? I just don't put a lot of stock in the ley lines. I really don't. Okay, so this here, we're gonna camp on this for a minute, all right? We're gonna put everything together. UAP reports, cryptid encounters, disappearance, historical paranormal reports, caves, mountain ranges, mineral geology, sensitivity facilities, ancient and cultural significant locations, and all proposed energy corridors. Suddenly the question changes. I'm no longer asking where are the UFOs or where is Bigfoot or where are the haunted places. But if you're asking that, here's a map that's going to show you that. What I am asking is why do completely different categories of strange reports keep sharing geography? Okay, remember I've talked about this before. I've talked about areas of high strangeness. There are two possibilities we have to take seriously. The first is the boring answer. And that's population, terrain, history, folklore, tourism, reporting bias, military activity, environmental conditions, and human psychology. Put enough of those together and you can manufacture what looks like a paranormal hotspot without everything paranormal happening there, or without anything paranormal happening there. So we can actually create false hotspots from all of those factors, all of it. The population, terrain, the history, the folklore, tourism definitely is a big thing. I gotta tell you, the paranormal community is full of tourist traps anymore, sadly. Reporting bias, again, military activity for the UFO thing, definitely, and because of certain other factors, military activity could possibly be involved. We don't know yet for sure, but it's possible. Environmental conditions, remember I talked about that already. And then human psychology. All of those things can create false positives, okay? That explanation is completely possible. But there's another possibility. What if we're making a mistake by separating this phenomena? Okay. And we've talked about this before. A lot of people like to say that they believe that all of it's connected. I'm one of those people. Now, how it's connected, I'm still not firmly on one side of the fence or the other, okay? Because there's a couple of schools of thought going around, one of them more predominant than the other. So basically what we're asking is, what if the box is the problem? And let me back up for it. So again, here's the cases. The Appalachian Heartland. Okay, so these are the hauntings and haunted spots. Again, I'll be putting all the stuff up on the group and in socials all through the week for you guys to check out and look at. So any and all of my socials should have something about this week. And here's the quartz crystals and minerals again, ley lines, and then here is the final overview. This is all of the whole mixture of everything together. This is the big question here, okay? We put UFOs in one box, cryptids in another, ghosts in another, missing time experiences somewhere else. Ancient stories get called mythology, modern encounters get called paranormal, and disappearances become statistics or a missing 411. But the witness standing in the woods doesn't experience categories. They experience something happening. Maybe the categories were created were by us, okay? Not whatever caused the reports. And if that's true, geography may be more important than the label we put on the phenomena. That's the idea behind the zones. So we have the final overlay, the complete picture. And that's what we got in front of us here now. And this is zone 1, where we step all the way back. Not proof of portals, not proof of Bigfoot, not proof that quartz crystals are powering some gigantic Appalachian paranormal Wi-Fi router. What we have is something more useful, a hypothesis. Zone 1 didn't win the test I expected. I expected to find one dominant phenomenon. A UFO zone, a cryptid zone, a disappearance zone. Instead, Zone 1 suggested something different. It suggested convergence. Maybe the fingerprint in this region isn't one phenomena occurring more often. Maybe it's different phenomena occurring in the same places. And that is something we can investigate. Location by location, witness by witness, because if this map is meaningless, eventually the evidence should destroy it. I want it to. But if we'll keep adding reliable information and the same places keep lighting up, that's when we got a very different conversation on our hands. Let that sink in. And remember, this is only the first zone. Beyond those mountains are 4 more zones. Different terrain, different histories, different stories, but maybe the same signal. Next time, we're leaving Appalachia behind. We're heading into the desert, ancient ruins, military testing grounds, nuclear history, UFO country, and some of the strangest landscapes in America. Arizona, New Mexico, Iowa, Nevada, Colorado. So, with that said, before I close out, I want to point out something about Zone 2. Okay. Colorado is what clued me in at first. And actually, Colorado, Nevada, because of Area 51 and all the reports of strangeness around there. That kind of led me to something. And then we got, of course, Skinwalker Ranch, Clearview Ranch. We got Sedona. Sedona also had its thing at one time. We have Joshua Tree. All of these areas have some very crazy history, some very crazy lore, and some things that have been. When we have the Phoenix Lights, that happened. That really happened. Snippy the horse, which I talked about with Katie Page on the show in the past. Cattle mutilations, very strong documentation of many cattle mutilations in Zone 2. So, and I did not go over cattle mutilations in Zone 1, but there have been cattle mutilations in Zone 1, and I may go over that on a different episode at a later date. Again, this is by no means a series that is 100% covering every single thing. This is just kind of introducing you guys to stuff, okay? So here's what I will tell you. The next 2 weeks, I do have interviews set up. After that, I don't think I have any set up yet. I have one more interview. I promised somebody I would reschedule an interview with them, and I'm going to try to do that. And then after that, we're going to go back into the zones again, because I want to get through all 5 zones first before we start deep diving into certain aspects that led me to surround, I guess, to create the central point for the zones, okay? And we'll understand that better. I also did not cover some key points I want to cover later on tonight, which is the whole thing of the parallels, the 33rd parallel and the 37th parallel. I did do some stuff last night testing those theories. Honestly, the results surprised me, and yet they didn't surprise me. And we'll go over that at a later date. I will tell you this, though. Remember, like, subscribe, share, continue watching. Check out the Facebook page, and I will have a link to my dot on here, so that my dot profile, so that you will have access to all of my current socials on the dot profile. So until next time, this is Backwoods Signal. We're broadcasting from behind the tree line. Keep your eyes and ears open and seek the signal.